The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 hums with 1,000 frantic goodbyes and anxious hellos. But at Gate B24, the silence is a weapon. It's a cold, sharp thing, wielded by a woman in a crisp blue uniform. Her name tag reads, Brenda, and she stands as the self-appointed guardian between a first-class ticket and the woman holding it. That woman, Dr. Alani Williams, watches as the final boarding call for the flight to Zurich echoes through the terminal. She is not just missing a flight. She is being denied a future she built from nothing, all because the gatekeeper has decided with one look that she doesn't belong. But what Brenda doesn't know is that beyond the gleaming windows of the terminal, another set of wings is being prepared, wings that don't answer to any airline but Alani herself, and they are about to make the most dramatic entrance JFK has seen in years. Dr. Alani Williams believed in order. It was the principle upon which she'd built her entire life and her $9 billion company, Etheria Innovations. Her code was clean, her algorithms precise, and her schedule was managed down to the minute. That Tuesday, the schedule dictated she be on Global Wings Flight 114, non-stop from JFK to Zurich, seated comfortably in 1A. She was to deliver the keynote speech at the World Health Innovation Summit, a speech detailing Etheria's new diagnostic AI, a tool poised to save millions of lives by detecting rare pediatric cancers years before they would normally manifest. Everything was in its place. The data was backed up. The speech was memorized, and her custom-tailored Tom Ford suit was carefully packed. The chaos of JFK was a variable she always accounted for. She arrived 3 hours early, breezed through TSA pre-check, and spent an hour in the airline's flagship lounge, finalizing her notes over a cup of green tea. She was calm, focused, and utterly unremarkable in her simple black silk blouse and trousers. She carried a single elegant leather carry-on. No fuss, no fanfare. She preferred to move through the world with quiet efficiency. When the call for first-class boarding began, Alani closed her laptop, slipped it into her bag, and made her way to Gate B24. The line was short, a distinguished-looking older man in a tweed jacket, a young couple buzzing with honeymoon energy, and then Alani. The gate agent scanning the passports and tickets was a young man, Daniel Chen, who offered a polite, practiced smile. Ahead of her, the man in tweed, Mr. Henderson, was waved through with a cheerful, "Enjoy your flight, sir." Then it was Alani's turn. She stepped forward and handed her passport and first-class boarding pass to the woman standing beside Daniel. This was the gate supervisor, Brenda Miller. Brenda was a woman in her late 40s, whose expression was permanently fixed in a state of mild disapproval. Her uniform was immaculate. Her blonde hair was sprayed into a rigid helmet, and her eyes held the weary cynicism of someone who had spent 2 decades dealing with the public and found them all wanting. She took Alani's documents without making eye contact. Her fingers, tipped with perfectly manicured but practical nails, drummed a staccato rhythm on the counter. She scanned the boarding pass. Beep. Then she looked at the passport. Then for the first time, she looked at Alani. It was a look Alani knew well. It was a look that traveled from her face down to her simple but expensive clothes, and back up again, cataloging, assessing, and ultimately judging. It was a look that asked a silent question. How Dr. Alani Williams? Brenda, said her voice flat, pronouncing the name as if it were a foreign concept. That's me, Alani replied, with a small professional smile. Brenda's eyes flicked back to the computer screen. I'm just going to need to verify a few things here. Alani's smile didn't waver, but a familiar cold knot began to form in her stomach. "Is there a problem? Standard procedure?" Brenda chirped the words, sounding anything but standard. She typed something into her keyboard with unnecessary force. The young agent Daniel glanced between Brenda and Alani, a flicker of unease in his eyes. Mr. Henderson, who had paused nearby to put his laptop in his bag, looked back at the growing delay. "Could you spell out your last name for me?" Brenda asked, still not looking up. "Williams." Alani spelled her voice even. This was a game, and the first rule was to never let them see your frustration. And you purchased this ticket when approximately 3 weeks ago, through my corporate travel department. Brenda hummed a non-committal tune. "First class is very full today. Very popular." She said it as if Alani couldn't possibly understand the economics of premium air travel. Sometimes, with last-minute upgrades or third-party bookings, things can get complicated. It wasn't a last-minute upgrade, and it was booked directly through the airline's corporate portal. Alani stated her tone still pleasant, but now edged with a steel precision that she usually reserved for board meetings. Behind her, the line for business class was starting to merge with the priority group, and a few impatient sighs became audible. Daniel, the junior agent, leaned towards Brenda. "Brenda, everything looks fine on my screen. The ticket is confirmed, paid in full, and checked in." Brenda shot him a glare that could curdle milk. "I handle the verifications, Daniel." "Thank you." She turned her attention back to Alani, a saccharine smile plastered on her face. "I'm sure you understand. We have to be extra careful with security these days." Alani knew exactly what she meant. Security was the catch-all excuse, the bulletproof vest for prejudice. It was a word that could justify any delay, any indignity, any suspicion. She simply nodded her jaw tight. "Of course. Please be as careful as you need to be." The challenge was issued quiet and clear. Brenda picked it up. Her smile tightened. She picked up the phone at the counter and began dialing, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Alani stood there, a paragon of patience, while the rest of the first-class cabin filed past her, some offering sympathetic glances, others looks of annoyance at the hold-up. The world was moving on. The flight was boarding, and she was standing still, caught in the invisible web of one woman's baseless suspicion. The minutes stretched into an eternity. Brenda remained on the phone, her conversation punctuated by phrases like unusual booking pattern and final verification. They were buzzwords, meaningless jargon, designed to create a smokescreen of legitimacy around her obstruction. Alani watched as the business class line dwindled, followed by the premium economy passengers. The main cabin groups were now being called. Mr. Henderson, the man in the tweed jacket, had been watching from the side. He finally walked back to the counter, his patience clearly exhausted. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Brenda directly. "What seems to be the problem here?" This woman was in front of me in line. "We're going to miss our slot if we keep this up." Brenda placed her hand over the receiver, her expression shifting to one of strained politeness for the benefit of the white male passenger. "Just a small ticketing issue, sir. We'll have it sorted out in a moment. You can go ahead and board." "I'll wait," Mr. Henderson said, crossing his arms. "It doesn't feel right that she's being held up while everyone else walks past." Her ticket scanned, didn't it? It? "It's a security protocol." Brenda insisted, her eyes daring him to challenge the word. But Alani intervened, giving Mr. Henderson a grateful nod. "It's all right. I appreciate your concern. but I'm sure the supervisor is just doing her job." She directed the last part to Brenda, her voice a masterclass in professional courtesy. But the message was clear. I see you, and so do others. Brenda's face flushed a blotchy red. She spoke quickly into the phone and hung up. "All right," she announced, as if she had just concluded a complex international negotiation. "We're almost there. I just need to see a secondary form of photo ID and the credit card used to purchase the ticket." This was the next level of the game. A request so far outside standard procedure that it was blatantly discriminatory. Daniel's eyes widened. He opened his mouth to say something, but a sharp look from Brenda silenced him. Alani didn't flinch. She opened her wallet and produced her corporate American Express card, a black Centurion card made of anodized titanium, and her California driver's license. She placed them on the counter. The quiet, heavy clink of the metal card seemed to echo in the tense silence. Brenda stared at the card. The name was unmistakable to Alani Williams, CEO Etheria Innovations. It wasn't a personal card. It was the card of a person who ran things. For a fleeting moment, a crack appeared in Brenda's composure. Doubt. But it was quickly replaced by a doubling down of her conviction. It had to be fraudulent. A woman like that couldn't possibly be the CEO of a major corporation. It was too far outside the narrow confines of her worldview. "This is a corporate card," Brenda stated, picking it up as if it might bite her. "Yes," Alani said. "As I mentioned, it was booked by my corporate travel department. We need the personal card of the traveler for verification." It was a lie. A bald-faced, easily disprovable lie. Airline policy required the card used for purchase, which was right there on the counter. "That's not true." Mr. Henderson snapped his patience, officially gone. "I've flown this airline for 20 years, and I use my corporate card exclusively. No one has ever asked for my personal card. This is harassment. Sir, if you don't lower your voice, I'll have to call airport security." Brenda threatened, her own voice rising. "Then call them," he shot back. "Let them come and explain to all of us why this passenger is being singled out." The scene was escalating. Other passengers were now openly staring. Daniel looked terrified, fidgeting with a stack of baggage tags. The final boarding call blared over the PA system. "This is the final call for Global Wings Flight 114 to Zurich. All ticketed passengers should be on board at this time." Brenda saw her chance. She gathered Alani's documents and pushed them back across the counter. "I'm sorry, but I'm not able to resolve this verification issue at this time. We're closing the flight. You've been denied boarding." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. With a sense of grim satisfaction, Brenda turned to Daniel. "Daniel, close it out. Shut the door." Daniel hesitated, his gaze fixed on Alani's calm, unreadable face. "Brenda, we can't." "Now, Mr. Chen," she barked, using her authority like a whip. With a pained, apologetic look at Alani, Daniel walked to the jet bridge door and slowly swung it shut. The heavy thud and the final decisive click of the lock echoed louder than any shout. It was over. Brenda had won. She stood straight, a smug little smile playing on her lips. She had protected the sanctity of Gate B24. She had enforced the rules. She had put someone she deemed unworthy back in her place. Alani stood motionless for a long moment, the silence now wrapping around her like a shroud. She looked at the closed door, then at Brenda's triumphant face. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She didn't demand to see a manager. Instead, she slowly picked up her passport, her license, and her black card. She slipped them back into her wallet with methodical grace. Then she took out her phone. Alani's movements were deliberate, a stark contrast to the frantic energy that had just filled the gate area. Mr. Henderson was sputtering with indignation, demanding Brenda's full name and employee number. Brenda, for her part, ignored him, busying herself with paperwork, the picture of bureaucratic indifference. She had won, and the aftermath was just noise. Alani scrolled through her contacts and pressed a single name, Marcus Vance. Her chief of staff. He answered on the first ring. "Alani, you should be taking off. Everything all right?" His voice was sharp, efficient. "Change of plans." "Marcus." Alani said, her voice impossibly calm. "I won't be taking flight 114. She saw Brenda's ear twitch. The gate supervisor was pretending not to listen, but her entire body was angled towards the conversation. "What happened?" Marcus's voice instantly lost its casual tone and sharpened to a razor's edge. "Mechanical issue, weather gate, agent issue." Alani replied, her eyes locking with Brenda's for a brief, chilling moment. "I've been denied boarding." There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Marcus, a man who had navigated hostile takeovers and international patent disputes, was momentarily speechless. Denied boarding, he finally repeated the words laced with disbelief. "On what grounds?" "Let's just call it a failure in security verification," Alani said, the irony thick in her voice. "Listen, Marcus, there's no time to argue with the airline. The summit is in less than 24 hours. I need to be in Zurich." "I'm on it," he said. The background noise on his end shifted. The gentle hum of an office was replaced by the rapid-fire clicking of a keyboard. "Give me your exact location." "Terminal 4, Gate B24. Brenda smirked. She clearly thought Alani was calling some customer service hotline to complain a futile gesture that would result in a form letter and a 10% off voucher for her next flight. She started processing the paperwork to offload Alani's checked luggage, a final petty act of victory. "Okay," Alani, Marcus said, his voice now a low, urgent hum of activity. "The asset is on standby at Teterboro, but we can have it at JFK in under an hour. I'll file a new flight plan. The Gulfstream is faster than the 777. We can make up the time in the air. You'll get there with 2 hours to spare before the welcome dinner." "Do it," Alani said simply. "Ava is on call. I'm pinging her now. She'll have the G700 wheels up in 20 minutes. I need you to get to the Shelter private terminal. It's on the other side of the airfield. I'll have a car waiting for you at arrivals door 4. Alani's eyes scanned the terminal. "There might be a more efficient way. Is there an open stand near the B gates?" "Stand B28 is clear, but you can't just wait." Marcus paused, the dawning realization in his voice. "You want her to bring the jet here?" "I want the gate agent who denied me boarding to see what she has done," Alani said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was colder than ice. "The paperwork will be a nightmare, I know. But you have a gift for making nightmares happen for other people, Marcus. Get it done. Consider it done," Marcus said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "I'll get on with the Port Authority director. We have a sizable contract with them for our cargo drone logistics. I think he'll be very interested to hear about the service one of his airport's key partners is providing. I'll call you back with instructions." Alani ended the call. The entire conversation had taken less than 90 seconds. She looked up. Mr. Henderson was still arguing with a stone-faced Brenda. Daniel, the junior agent, was staring at Alani, his expression a mixture of awe and terror, as if he'd just watched someone calmly defuse a bomb. He'd heard snippets of the call Gulfstream Teterboro bring the jet here, and while he couldn't piece it all together, he knew something extraordinary was about to happen. The atmosphere at the gate began to shift. The initial anger and frustration had dissipated, replaced by a strange, expectant quiet. The Boeing 777 that Alani was supposed to be on began its slow, powerful pushback from the gate, its engines whining to life. Brenda watched it go, a final, satisfied smile on her face. She had done her job. The problem was gone. She turned back to her computer, ready to move on to the next flight, the next set of passengers. She was about to log Alani's information for a refund request when a shrill ring from the gate's direct operations line pierced the air. She snatched it up. "Gate B24, Miller. Speaking." Her face went pale. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, sickly white. Her smug confidence evaporated, replaced by wide-eyed panic. She mumbled, "Yes, sir. I understand. No, sir, there must be a mistake. But, yes, sir." She hung up the phone, her hand trembling. She looked out the massive plate glass window, her gaze searching the taxiways. She looked at Alani no longer with contempt, but with a dawning, sickening horror. The hunter had just realized she was trapped in a call with the lion. "What is it?" Brenda Alani asked, her voice soft, but carrying the weight of an avalanche. "Was that your manager?" Brenda couldn't speak. She just stared at Alani, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Outside, the ground crew who had just unhooked from the 737 were suddenly scrambling. A set of air stairs was being driven at speed across the tarmac, not towards the terminal, but out towards an empty hard stand adjacent to the gate. The ground traffic controllers were waving their light sticks, clearing a path. Something was coming. The first sign was a distant shape in the late afternoon sky, impossibly sleek and white against the pale blue. It was smaller than the commercial airliners, lumbering around it, but it moved with the predatory grace of a falcon among pigeons. As it descended, its profile became clear: the long, slender fuselage, the high T-tail, the two powerful Rolls-Royce engines mounted at the rear. It wasn't a commercial jet. It was a machine built for speed, luxury, and power. It was a Gulfstream G700, one of the fastest and longest-range private jets in the world, a 21st-century chariot worth nearly $80 million. At gate B24, everyone was now pressed against the glass. The few remaining passengers waiting for other flights, the airport staff, even the baristas from the nearby coffee stand. The drama had drawn a crowd. Mr. Henderson stood beside Alani, his earlier anger replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated delight. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, a grin spreading across his face. Brenda was frozen, her face a mask of disbelief. This couldn't be happening. It was a coincidence. A private jet was landing, yes, but it had nothing to do with the woman in the black silk blouse. It was for some celebrity, some oil sheikh, some Wall Street titan. It couldn't be for her. The Gulfstream touched down on the runway, with a whisper of smoke from its tires, a landing so smooth it was barely perceptible. It didn't head for the general aviation hangars on the far side of the airport. Instead, guided by a frantic-looking ground crew vehicle with a flashing yellow light, it turned directly towards Terminal 4. It taxied with an aristocratic confidence, its gleaming white paint and dark oval windows reflecting the hulking utilitarian shapes of the commercial airliners it passed. It came to a stop on hardstand B28, directly in the line of sight of gate B24's windows. The engine spooled down with a low, expensive-sounding hum. The air stairs that had been rushed into place were carefully maneuvered to the jet's door. Alani's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Eva is on the ground. Port Authority is expediting everything. Your chariot awaits, madam. The main cabin door of the Gulfstream opened not with a clunky lever, but with a quiet hydraulic hiss. It folded down to become a set of self-contained, carpeted stairs. Standing at the top of the opening was a woman in a sharp pilot's uniform, her blonde hair tied back in a neat bun. She surveyed the scene, her gaze sweeping over the terminal until it found the crowd at gate B24. She gave a subtle professional nod. This was Captain Eva Rostova. Then Alani's phone rang again. She answered it, putting it on speaker. Dr. Williams. This is Keith Saunders, JFK Airport Duty Manager, a panicked voice said. Ma'am, I am so sorry for any inconvenience you have experienced. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. Brenda flinched at the sound of the voice. She knew Keith Saunders. He was the big boss, the man who could end her career with a single email. A misunderstanding. Alani repeated her voice, calm and questioning. Your gate supervisor, Miss Miller, seemed to understand her duties perfectly. She denied me boarding on a flight for which I had a valid first-class ticket. She closed the gate and the flight has departed. Yes, ma'am, and we are launching a full and immediate investigation into the incident. Ms. Miller has been temporarily relieved of her duties pending that investigation. Brenda swayed on her feet, grabbing the counter for support. Temporarily relieved. The first nail in her professional coffin. Ms. Williams. Saunders continued, his voice slick with desperation. I see your alternate transportation has arrived. I have dispatched a VIP transport to your gate to take you to the aircraft immediately. We have waived all tarmac transfer protocols to expedite your departure. That won't be necessary, Alani said, her eyes fixed on Brenda. I can walk. There was a confused silence from Saunders. Ma'am? You can't walk across the active tarmac. Open the jet bridge door you just closed. Alani commanded, her voice, no longer quiet, but ringing with authority. Extend it to the hard stand. I will be boarding my plane directly from this gate. It was an unprecedented request. Jet bridges were calibrated for specific aircraft types for specific doors. Mating one to a private jet on a hard stand was a logistical nightmare. But Marcus had clearly already greased the wheels. Right away, Dr. Tour, William Saunders said, without a hint of hesitation. Right away. Alani hung up. She looked at Daniel, the young agent who was standing by the door, pale and trembling. Daniel, you heard the man. Open the door. With shaking hands, Daniel swiped his keycard and punched in the code. The lock clicked open. He pushed the heavy door, and it swung wide, revealing the empty jet bridge. A moment later, with a series of groans and whirs, the massive metal tunnel began to move, slowly, majestically extending out from the terminal like a giant arm reaching for the sleek white jet. The show was complete. It wasn't just about getting to Zurich anymore. It was a statement. It was a lesson. Alani picked up her single carry-on bag. She turned to Mr. Henderson. Thank you for your support, she said warmly. I wish you a safe flight, whenever it may be. He just shook his head in amazement. That was the best pre-flight entertainment I've ever seen. Give 'em hell in Zurich, Doctor. Finally, Alani turned her full attention to the woman who had started it all. Brenda was backed against the far counter, her face a mess of terror and confusion. Her world, with its neat little boxes and rigid, prejudiced rules, had just been turned inside out and set on fire. "You wanted verification, Ms. Miller?" Alani said, her voice soft, but every word a hammer blow. "You questioned my ticket. You questioned my identity. You questioned my presence in a first-class cabin. Let me offer you the verification you were looking for. That jet out there. That is a Gulfstream G700. Its tail number is N42AI. The AI stands for Etheria Innovations. That is my company. This is my jet. And I am flying to Zurich to deliver a presentation that will save the lives of children. A presentation I will now make because I have the resources to overcome the petty bigotry of people like you." She paused, letting the words sink in. "You didn't just inconvenience a passenger today. You tried to stand in the way of progress. You tried to halt innovation. All because you looked at my face and decided I didn't belong. Remember this moment, Brenda. Remember it every time you question your place in the world, because I promise you from this moment on, you will be questioning it a lot." With that, Alani Williams turned and walked into the jet bridge, her footsteps echoing in the stunned silence of the gate. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The damage was done, and the karmic tidal wave was just beginning to swell. As Alani walked down the carpeted jet bridge, the sterile, impersonal environment of the terminal gave way to the bespoke luxury of her aircraft. Captain Eva Rostova met her at the door with a crisp salute and a warm smile. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Williams. Mark has filled me in. I trust the new arrangements are satisfactory." "More than satisfactory, Eva. Thank you for getting here so quickly." "We broke a few speed records." Eva grinned. "The flight plan is filed. We're number 1 for takeoff. Zurich in 7 hours and 15 minutes. The interior of the G700 was a world away from the cramped functionality of a commercial airliner. It was a symphony of cream leather-polished mahogany and brushed platinum. There were plush reclining seats, a full galley, a private stateroom, and high-speed satellite Wi-Fi. It was her office, her sanctuary, her method of collapsing time and space to her will. As Alani settled into her seat, the jet bridge was already retracting. The ground crew gave a final thumbs up, and the powerful Rolls-Royce engines spooled to life. Within minutes, the G700 was taxiing towards the runway, leaving gate B24 and its chaotic drama behind. Back at the gate, the world was collapsing for Brenda Miller. Keith Saunders, the airport duty manager, had arrived in person, his face a thunderous mask of fury. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by 2 stern-looking representatives from Global Wings Airlines corporate security and a woman from human resources whose smile was as sharp and dangerous as a shard of glass. They didn't speak to Brenda in public. Saunders simply jerked his head towards a small, glass-walled office behind the gate desk. "Ms. Miller, now." The walk to the office was the longest 10 yards of Brenda's life. The whispers and stares of her colleagues and the remaining passengers felt like physical blows. The awe that had filled the air at the sight of the private jet had now curdled into contempt, all of it directed at her. Daniel Chen was being quietly spoken to by one of the corporate security men, but his expression was one of relief, not fear. He was a witness, not a suspect. Inside the office, the door was closed, but the scene was visible to anyone watching. Saunders began his voice a low, controlled roar that was still audible through the glass. He laid out the facts, each one a hammer striking the coffin of Brenda's career. Dr. Alani Williams wasn't just a first-class passenger. She was the CEO of Etheria Innovations, a company that held Global Wing's multi-million-dollar corporate travel account. Not just for her, but for her 5,000 employees. She was a Chairman's Circle member, the airline's highest invitation-only status, reserved for individuals who could single-handedly affect the company's bottom line. Her profile was flagged with a dozen alerts. Do not delay. Extend every courtesy. VIP. Level 1. Brenda had not only failed to extend courtesy, she had spit in the face of one of their most valuable clients. But it was worse than that. Marcus Vance had not been idle. While the G700 was in the air, he had made 2 phone calls. The first was to the CEO of Global Wings, a man he played golf with. The second was to the Port Authority director, as promised. He had calmly explained the situation, framing it not as a personal slight, but as a significant corporate liability and a failure of the airport's commitment to providing a safe and non-discriminatory environment. The HR woman took over from Saunders. She spoke of the airline's zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. She mentioned the potential for a lawsuit, not just from Dr. Williams, but from the federal government for civil rights violations. She talked about the brand damage, the viral potential of the story. A respected black female CEO, a pioneer in medical technology, blocked from a critical flight by a gate agent on a power trip. The headlines wrote themselves. Brenda tried to defend herself. She stammered about protocol and security. She insisted the booking looked suspicious. Suspicious? The HR woman cut her off, her voice like cracking ice. What exactly was suspicious about it, Brenda? That a black woman was sitting in seat 1A. That she paid with a corporate card that clearly identified her as the head of that corporation. Did you run the same verification on Mr. Henderson in front of her, or the honeymooning couple, or any other passenger in the first-class cabin? Brenda had no answer. Her reasons, which had seemed so solid and justifiable in the echo chamber of her own prejudice, now sounded exactly like what they were: flimsy, pathetic excuses for racism. The final blow came from Saunders. The Port Authority is reviewing our lease agreement for Terminal 4 in light of this incident. Etheria Innovations is one of their key future partners for a new logistics hub. Your actions today haven't just cost us a client, Ms. Miller. You may have cost us our gate. The meeting ended swiftly after that. Brenda was told her airport credentials were being immediately revoked. She was to be escorted from the premises. Her employment was terminated effective immediately. As the 2 security men led a pale, shaking Brenda towards a service exit, she passed by the main gate desk. Daniel Chen was there, giving his official statement to the airline investigator. He refused to meet her gaze. He had tried in his small way to warn her to stop her. She had ignored him. Her final view of the job she had held for 22 years was of her own reflection in the glass, a stunned, defeated woman being led away like a common criminal. And through the window she could just make out a white streak climbing steeply into the sky, banking east towards the Atlantic. A symbol of the world she had so profoundly misunderstood, disappearing from her life forever. For many stories it would have ended there. A job lost, a lesson learned. But Karma Alani Williams knew was not a lightning strike. It was a cascade. An avalanche started by a single, poorly chosen word. The consequences of Brenda Miller's actions were only just beginning to ripple outwards, and they were about to drown her. The story broke the next day. A passenger, likely the delighted Mr. Henderson, had filmed the G700 pulling up to the gate on their phone. Another had been live tweeting the entire confrontation. By the time Alani landed in Zurich, to a personal welcome from the summit organizers. Flying while black and hashed Global Wings Gate were trending worldwide. The narrative was explosive. A brilliant black tech CEO on her way to save children was blocked by a racist gate agent, only to have her own private jet land on the runway in the ultimate power move. It was a story made for the digital age. Global Wings Airlines went into full-blown crisis mode. Their stock price tumbled cent in pre-market trading, wiping out over $500 million in value. Their carefully crafted image as a progressive, inclusive airline was shattered. They issued a groveling public apology, announced a company-wide mandatory bias training program, and publicly stated that the employee in question had been terminated. They also made a 7-figure donation to a charity of Dr. Williams's choice. Alani, through her PR team, accepted the apology and the donation, but coolly announced that Etheria Innovations was terminating its exclusive contract with the airline, a loss of nearly $15 million a year for Global Wings. For Brenda, the public shaming was brutal. Though the airline didn't name her amateur internet sleuths, pieced it together in hours. Her photo, her name, and her address were plastered across social media. She became the face of Airport Karen. She couldn't leave her modest Long Island home without facing a barrage of reporters or the disgusted stares of her neighbors. But the true karmic blow was yet to land. It came from a place she never could have anticipated. Brenda's husband, Gary Miller, was a senior project manager at a mid-sized construction firm, Vellum Construction. For the past year, he had been the lead on a tender for the biggest project in the company's history, a contract to build the new East Coast headquarters for a rapidly expanding tech company. The project was worth $200 million. It would secure Vellum's future and guarantee Gary a massive promotion and bonus money they desperately needed to pay off their mounting debts. They were one of 2 finalists, and Gary was confident they had the winning bid. The name of the tech company was Seraphim Dynamics. A week after the JFK incident, Gary Miller was called into an emergency meeting with the CEO of Vellum Construction. He walked in, expecting good news. He was met by a stone-faced board of directors. The CEO, a man named Robert Maxwell, looked grim. "Gary, we've been informed by Seraphim Dynamics that we are no longer being considered for the headquarters project." Gary's blood ran cold. What? Why, our bid was perfect. Their team loved the proposal. Maxwell slid a printed email across the polished table. It was from the Chief Operating Officer of Seraphim Dynamics. The message was short and brutally direct. It stated that due to a recent highly publicized incident involving a Vellum employee's immediate family member and the reputational risk associated with it, Seraphim's board had decided to move in a different direction. It concluded, "Our company culture is built on principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We cannot in good conscience partner with a firm whose senior leadership may not share those core values." Gary was confused. A Vellum employee's family member. Who are they talking about? Robert. Maxwell sighed, rubbing his temples. They're talking about your wife, Gary. Brenda. The final piece of the puzzle, the one that turned a personal failing into a catastrophic family legacy, clicked into place. The CEO of Seraphim Dynamics, a man named David Axelrod, sat on 3 different philanthropic boards. On 2 of those boards, he served alongside another member, Dr. Alani Williams. They weren't just colleagues, they were friends who shared a vision for a more equitable future in technology. Alani never had to say a word to him about the incident. She didn't need to. When Axelrod saw the news, he saw the name Miller, and he saw the risk. He saw the poison that one person's prejudice could inject into a system, and he chose to protect his company from it. It wasn't revenge. It was business. It was a consequence. Gary Miller was fired that afternoon. The company couldn't afford the stink of the scandal, and he was now radioactive. When he got home and told Brenda the reality of her actions, finally crashed down upon her. It wasn't just her job, her reputation, her pride. It was her husband's career, their home, their future. Her single act of prejudice at gate B24 had set off a chain reaction that had incinerated their entire life. She had closed a door on one woman, and in doing so had slammed shut every door in her own world. The world does not stop for injustice, nor does it pause for justice delivered. It simply continues to spin, and in its rotation settles all accounts. For the players in the drama of Gate B24, the months that followed were not a sudden conclusion, but a slow, deliberate balancing of a cosmic ledger, where every action was weighed and every consequence paid in full. In Zurich, the auditorium was a cavernous space filled with the world's most brilliant and skeptical minds in medicine. Dr. Alani Williams stood on the stage, a lone figure against a screen, displaying the intricate neural network of her Etheria AI. She wasn't thinking of Brenda Miller or Global Wings Airlines. She was thinking of a 7-year-old girl from rural India named Priya, a case study whose data had been instrumental in the AI's final calibration. The AI had detected a rare neuroblastoma from a simple retinal scan, flagging it 3 years before any physical symptoms would have appeared. Priya was now cancer-free. Alani spoke not with the bombast of a tech mogul, but with the quiet passion of a true scientist. She walked the audience through the data, the machine learning protocols, the ethical safeguards. She showed them how the algorithm could learn to identify patterns the human eye could never perceive, turning a standard, inexpensive eye exam into a life-saving diagnostic tool. When she put Priya's smiling face on the screen and explained her story, a hush fell over the hall. This wasn't theoretical. It was real. This wasn't about profits. It was about futures. When she finished, there was a beat of profound silence, and then an eruption of applause. It was a wave of sound, a thunderous ovation from doctors and researchers who understood in a way few could the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. Later, a renowned oncologist from Johns Hopkins gripped her hand, his eyes shining. "Dr. Williams," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you haven't just built a new tool, you've built a new kind of hope." It was on the flight home aboard the G700, slicing through the stratosphere high above the commercial routes, that Alani allowed herself a moment of reflection. The incident at JFK felt like a lifetime ago, a grubby, petty squabble from a different reality. The sheer force of Brenda Miller's prejudice, her attempt to build a wall in Alani's path, seemed so small and insignificant when measured against the work she was doing. Yet it had happened, and for every Alani Williams who had a Gulfstream G700 on standby, how many others were there who didn't? How many brilliant minds? Future doctors, artists, and innovators were being turned away at gates literal and metaphorical by people like Brenda. The thought settled in her, not as anger, but as a clear, undeniable calling. Her power wasn't just in her wealth or her technology. It was in her ability to clear the path for others. By the time the jet touched down in New York, the Open Skies grant had been fully conceived. It wasn't just a scholarship fund. It was a comprehensive mentorship and support program through her foundation designed to identify, fund, and elevate women of color in STEM and aviation. It would pay for tuition, flight school, and advanced degrees. More importantly, it would connect them with a network of leaders, ensuring they never had to face a closed door alone. The first scholarship was named the Daniel Chen Award for Integrity, a quiet nod to the young man who had shown a flicker of decency in a moment of darkness. That decency did not go unnoticed. At the chaotic headquarters of Global Wings Airlines, Daniel Chen became an unlikely symbol of the company's desperate attempt to redeem itself. He had given his statement to the internal investigators with unflinching honesty. He reported Brenda's exact words, her escalating demands, and his own attempts to intervene. He didn't embellish or editorialize. He simply presented the truth, and the truth was a damning indictment. 2 weeks after the incident, he was called into the office of the Vice President of North American Operations. He walked in expecting a reprimand, a transfer, or worse. Instead, the VP offered him a promotion to gate supervisor and a place in the airline's coveted leadership development program. "You showed judgment and integrity under pressure, Mr. Chen," the VP had said, his tone weary. "Qualities it seems we are in desperate need of. The Alani Williams incident, as we are now calling it, has forced a reckoning here. We can't just fire one bad employee. We have to fix the system that allowed her to flourish. We want you to be a part of that." Daniel accepted. He soon found himself helping to design the new mandatory anti-bias and de-escalation training, which employees grimly nicknamed the Brenda Mandate. Drawing from his own experience, he helped create realistic scenarios that trained agents to see the person, not the stereotype, and to understand that their authority was a tool for service, not for power. He became a quiet leader, respected by his peers not just for his sudden promotion, but for the moral courage he had displayed. He was a daily reminder at Gate B24 that doing the right thing even when it was difficult was the only flight plan that led to a safe landing. For Brenda Miller, there was no safe landing. There was only the free fall. The public shaming was the first impact, a brutal collision with internet infamy. But the second impact, the one that shattered their foundation, was Gary's termination. The news delivered by his own ashen-faced husband was incomprehensible to Brenda. How could her actions at the airport reach into his life, into his company? The CEO of his client is friends with her. Gary had explained, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. "It's all connected, Bren. You pulled one loose thread, and the whole damn tapestry came apart." Their life a tapestry they had spent 2 decades weaving unraveled with astonishing speed. The first thread to go was their social standing. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid them. The next was their financial stability. With both their incomes gone, the mortgage on their pristine suburban home became an impossible burden. The for sale sign on the lawn was a public flag of their defeat, packing up their lives into brown cardboard boxes. Brenda was forced to handle objects that represented a life of comfort she had taken for granted and had single-handedly destroyed. Gary, a proud man who had defined himself by his career, was broken. His name, Miller, now linked forever with his wife's viral infamy, was toxic. He sent out hundreds of resumes with no response. Recruiters who had once courted him now wouldn't return his calls. The strain on their marriage was immense. The silence in their small rented apartment was louder than any argument, thick with blame and regret. He eventually took a job as a night shift dispatcher for a regional trucking company. A shadow of his former career, coordinating the movements of others, while his own life remained stagnant. Brenda's search for work was even more futile. Any job involving customer service was an impossibility. Her face was too recognizable. She eventually found a position through a temp agency that asked no questions. It was on the night crew for a commercial cleaning company. Her new uniform was a drab grey smock. Her authority was a mop and a bucket. Her domain was a sprawling, soulless corporate park, empty and silent after 5 p.m. She spent her nights scrubbing floors, cleaning bathrooms, and emptying the trash of people whose lives were moving forward, while hers had been thrown into reverse. The physical work was grueling, but the psychological toll was worse. It was a nightly exercise in humiliation, a constant reminder of how far she had fallen. One night, close to dawn, she was cleaning the executive boardroom on the top floor of a financial services firm. It was a space of immense power, with a 20-foot mahogany table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the distant lights of Manhattan. As she wiped down the gleaming table, she saw a magazine left behind. It was the latest issue of Forbes, and there on the cover was Dr. Alani Williams. She was not pictured in a stuffy suit. She was in a lab laughing, surrounded by her diverse team of young, brilliant engineers. Her expression was one of genuine joy and boundless optimism. The headline blazed in bold letters: Innovator of the Year, Dr. Alani Williams and the AI that gives children a future. Brenda sank into one of the plush leather executive chairs, her cleaning rag falling from her hand. She stared at the cover at the woman she had tried to bar from a simple airplane seat. In that moment at the gate, Brenda had seen herself as the gatekeeper of an exclusive world, and Alani as an interloper. But she had it all wrong. Alani wasn't trying to get into Brenda's world. Alani was busy building a new one, a better one. A world where children didn't die from preventable diseases. And what had Brenda been building? A world of suspicion. A world of petty rules and imagined slights. A world so small it could fit into the confines of a single airport gate. She had dedicated her life to enforcing boundaries, while Alani had dedicated hers to breaking them. The quiet hum of the building's ventilation system filled the silent room. Brenda looked at her own reflection in the polished table. A tired, defeated woman in a grey smock sitting in a seat she didn't belong in a room she was only paid to clean. The irony was a physical weight crushing the air from her lungs. She had not merely been fired. She had been rendered insignificant. Her punishment wasn't a single dramatic event, but this slow, grinding realization of her own irrelevance in the face of true purpose. Dr. Williams had soared to new heights, changing the world for the better. Daniel Chen was rising, building a better culture from within. And she, Brenda Miller, was left here in the dark, emptying the trash of the world she had fought so desperately and so foolishly to protect. The ledger was balanced. The account was closed. The story of Dr. Alani Williams and Brenda Miller isn't just about a private jet and a fired employee. It's a powerful reminder that prejudice isn't a harmless opinion. It's an active force with devastating consequences. Brenda's actions started a chain reaction that unraveled not just her own life, but the lives of those around her, proving that the seeds of hate can grow into a forest of ruin. On the other hand, Alani's story shows us the incredible power of quiet strength, of turning a moment of profound disrespect into a catalyst for positive change that will uplift generations to come. If this story resonated with you, and if you believe that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of what they look like, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more true stories of justice and karma. By sharing these narratives, we shine a light on injustice and celebrate the strength of those who refuse to be diminished. Thank you for listening.